Hello and good morning, friends. Today, I want to talk to you about what should you check first for low water pressure before you call that plumber so we can save you some money. Let's get into it. So, I get asked this question quite a lot. I live on a well, I've got low water pressure, something just doesn't quite seem right. It used to be better, but now all of a sudden the water pressure just kind of sucks. What do I do? Well, the first thing that I always recommend to check, the aerator on your sink, right? That little circular thing right underneath the faucet. Well, those are very small screens that can sometimes get clogged up, right? A well's a natural product. Every now and again, a little bit of sand, a little bit of dirt and sediment will get in there, and it could potentially plug up those screens. So what is an aerator, right? So you'll usually see those on most sinks. Sometimes they're built into the sink, sometimes they're outside of the sink, sometimes they don't exist at all on the sink. And they're a little bit complicated to get out depending on the type of sink that you have, right? So the best way that you can determine what you're working with is just go physically look, right? Stupid answer, I know, but it's true. If you walk over to your sink and you take a look at it, if you can see the circular part, that's going to be the exterior type. And if you can't see it, it's usually built into the faucet and you're going to need a special key to get it out. You can also use a really small screwdriver, but I'm not a big fan of using the screwdriver trick because it always seems like the stupid teeth get messed up. They don't quite come out right. Or if you put them back in, they don't quite sit all the way. So the keys are like $6. Just buy the key. It's worth every penny. Home Depot sells them, Lowe's sells them. You'll get like 6 different sizes because, of course, manufacturers don't have a universal size. They have slightly different sizing, which can be really annoying. So with a well, you will have sediment that goes through the water, right? I usually recommend to new homeowners and just any existing homeowner, every 6 months or so, just go over there and unscrew the stupid thing and wash it off, right? Doing that regularly will make it to where you're probably less likely to have issues with the aerator itself. If just unscrewing it, running it under the water, and just kind of using your finger to wipe off the screen doesn't work, you could also consider using a vinegar bath, right? Or just go buy a new one. They're only a couple bucks. They're really not that expensive. Now, if you have like a specific fixture that's got a really ornate top to it, and maybe the aerator's built into it, you might not be able to just go buy a replacement. But a lot of times those specifically like ornate ones, like if you have like a matte black finish or something to that effect where it looks nice, the aerator is going to be part of it, and you can just pop that out, go buy a 12-pack of miscellaneous sized aerators, stick the new one in there, and you're back in business, right? The aerators is, I would probably say 9 out of 10 of the issues that I run across is it's just as simple as unscrewing it. Now, generally they should be hand tight. Sometimes they don't come off, right? That's where it kind of sucks to get them off, and you got to be a little bit careful because you can scuff up the finish or you can actually break the aerator. If you scuff the finish, that's not as fun to fix, right? It's pretty tedious depending on the brand. Sometimes you can get a replacement, sometimes you have to replace the faucet, right? But if you're trying to avoid that, the best way that I have found to get the aerator off without potentially scuffing it, just get a regular hand towel and your channel locks, right? Put the hand towel around it, channel locks, gently pull on it, right? It should just come right off. Now, if it hasn't been removed in quite a while, maybe not, right? Now, if it's been 30 years since it's been removed, it's probably time to replace that faucet anyway, so you can get up with the times. Shower heads, similar concept, right? They're a little bit more tedious, in my opinion, with how cheap shower heads can be. I would just replace the shower head. Now, if you have a fancy shower head, a little bit less so. But the calcium deposits and stuff can get in there and cause it to kind of slow down or have some issues with the flow, right? The second most common issue that I'm going to run into is going to be the filter, right? A lot of homes, especially in our area, we're in the Piedmont range, so we're in the mountains, right? Or the Appalachian Mountains. What'll happen is you get a lot of sediment, shale, iron, debris, and stuff that's in the water. Well, what a lot of people will do is they'll use a sediment filter to address that. Now, the problem with sediment filters is if they're doing their job, they're going to clog up, right? So usually what I recommend to people is if you're really concerned about it, and if you want to know without having to take the whole thing apart, you just put a pressure gauge before, which you should already have if you have a pressure tank, right? You should have a pressure gauge before it, and then put a pressure gauge after the filter. And if you notice there's a major discrepancy between the two, well, now you know that the water is getting bottlenecked at that filter, and then all you do is just change out the filter and you're good to go. Most of the filters in our area are going to be canister filters, right? Little blue things, or sometimes they're clear or white. They're going to be about 12 inches long. Sometimes they're 3 inches in diameter. Sometimes they're skinny. Sometimes they're taller. It just depends on who makes it. But there's going to be a filter inside of there that basically all you do is you just unscrew the canister, of course with the water off, right? If you don't turn the water off, you're going to run into some problems. And then you throw the old filter away, and then you put the new filters in, screw it back on, you're back in business. Now, some people will go through the headache of actually re-cleaning the old filter. I think it depends on how much it costs and what your time commitment's willing to go with, right? The simplest, most basic version of a filter is like $6, if that. To me, the amount of headache in cleaning the stupid thing, it's not really worth it. I'd rather just get a new one that I know is clean and good to go and just stick it in there. Because most of the time, you're only changing it every 3 or 6 months. So if you're changing it every 6 months, you're talking $12 a year. I don't know. To me, that's not, just don't go buy Chipotle for once in a month, right? And you'll pay for the year's worth of filters. You'll be fine. There are some circumstances where some properties just have really gnarly water, and you got to have 2 or 3, sometimes even 4 filters just to get rid of all the debris. That's where it gets a little bit more into, you want to try and do some cost savings. But the filters are your second most common issue. A lot of places, especially in our area, when we install these sorts of things, you want to put a bypass on. So if you as a homeowner are trying to figure out, is it the filter without taking things apart? Maybe you don't have a pressure gauge. Some filters will have a physical valve that you can turn to bypass it on the filter itself, but it's not super common, right? Most of the homes around here will physically have a ball valve before it, after it, and in between the house and the pressure tank, and then you can just bypass that whole system entirely, and then that'll help you figure out, is it the filter, right? Now, the least common cause for low pressure that I would see is going to be something wrong with your pressure tank or pressure switch, right? It does happen, right? Let's just say the switch is going bad and maybe it's not cycling correctly, or maybe the pressure tank's bladder's ruptured. You could also have a low yield, right? That's also a potential, but it's not as common. But if you've got a bad pressure tank or a bad pressure switch, you are going to run into some pressure issues within the home. The best way that I can usually recommend to determine this as yourself is go turn on a sink or a bathtub and just go stand next to it and listen, right? When that pressure switch kicks on, it should take about 60 seconds before the first cycle completes itself, right? If it's cycling every 5 seconds, like right back and forth, that's called a quick cycle, right? That means the bladder's gone, it's game over, you got to replace the pressure tank. Alternatively, what you can also do is there's going to be a little valve cap right on top of the pressure tank. Take that cover off and take a tire pressure gauge and check to see what is the pressure inside of the tank while it's running. Usually in our area, you'll have a 40-60 switch. Sometimes you'll have a 30-50. On really old systems, you'll have a 20-40. Almost nobody uses that anymore, but you should be able to see where you're roughly at in your range, especially if your pressure gauge at the bottom is not working, right? I always trust but verify those pressure gauges. They're cheap, and because they're cheap, they're almost always wrong, right? So you want to use some other check to make sure that you have the same kind of reading, right, between the top and the bottom. I hope that this might have given you a little bit more of an idea of what to check for if you have low water pressure in your home. I'm a big proponent of having homeowners attempt first to see if they can figure out what's going on, because usually the solution's a pretty easy one, and it'll save you money, right? Especially in the economy nowadays, everybody has a little bit less money and they're struggling. It's always good to try and figure something out first. And if you can't figure it out, that's okay. That's why professionals exist, right? You can call them. And the worst thing that can happen is you don't figure out the problem, you call them, and you were going to call them anyway. So at least spend the 15 minutes just to check first, see if you can figure it out before you spend all the money, right? If you found this useful, or if you found this insightful, please hit that like button, subscribe. If you have had any pressure issues in your home, or if you've come across any kind of shenanigans like that, leave a comment below. Share your experience. Let's all grow together. Tell everybody else what you did, what you saw, how you solved it. And maybe there was something that you came across that somebody else came across and you could help them figure it out too. Till next time, guys.